but I want to learn. And at first, he was really interested in me because he thought that I had no chance because I came from a Mexican American background, meaning because of my identities. And this is another thing that was Gurdjieff talked about is identification. How much was identified with my background, my history? How about my teacher also said that I was passive. My mind was passive. I was living out of my emotional center. I have very little mental activity. And another thing is I was Catholic. He said, how much influence is the Catholic Church? The Catholic Church teaches not to think. Do what I tell you, and don't think. And so I had everything against me. But there's one thing that even surprised my teacher, that I stayed in this group for about 25 years. And all my peers, all my friends who were in this group, male friends and women friends, were much more educated than I. Some were doctors, psychologists, managers, business owners, physicists, teachers, and very well educated. And that is not a requirement because they left the group after a number of years. And I would say that I was the only male that lasted for 25 years. And I would say what really stops men or women from, say, staying in a group to improve oneself, to come to this I, and what we're trying to do is develop ourselves, and that way we can become more conscious of who we are. But I would say that that the individual who does not persist in this study, because not only will you go from Gurdjieff, but you have to go into Spinoza, because Spinoza, I would say, is the next level of study. To me, for you who are die-hard Gurdjieff students, that's fine. Stay with him. Do what you would believe in. But those who find that Gurdjieff is not enough, Gurdjieff gives us the state of what humanity is in, a terrible state, a sleep state. But there is another level, and I would say this is where Spinoza comes in. Spinoza teaches us how to really use the mind, and what the mind is, what God is, and what the emotions are, and how the emotions are cause slavery. And then in the last part of the ethics, the Spinoza's ethics, is called human freedom. And this is where we really can see our connection with nature, a connection with God, and how we can become free and a master of ourselves. But I would say Gurdjieff is the first step. And one of the things that Gurdjieff brings out is the idea of intelligence. And this is where I would say Spinoza and Gurdjieff agree, that we do have a spiritual, intuitive intelligence. That Gurdjieff would say that we have no idea of it now, and we don't really comprehend or really understand the powers that we are capable of. I'm not talking about power over others, but I'm talking about an inner power that comes from clarity of thinking. Peace is not an outside event. Peace is an internal process. A peaceful state is an active state, not a sleep state. When an individual begins to really work on himself or herself, there are going to be changes that you are not aware of yet, because right now you are governed by as Spinoza would say, the first level of knowledge. And this is where the real sleep state is, as Gurdjieff states. Spinoza now, I'm going to bring a little bit about Spinoza, talks about there are three levels of knowledge. The first level is hearsay and experience. You're brought up in your environment, if you had parents or not. Everything that you learn in the environment, you become a part of. You learn how to worship. You learn how to think or not think. You have all the interests of the environment you grew up in, and consequently you become a master of that identity. You're a slave to that. I won't say a master, but a slave to that. And consequently, there is nobody home. We are robotic. We react. We live a life of reaction. And like I mentioned, I was just like my father. He is a man who is very smart. I didn't have his intelligence, but I had his anger. I had his frustration. I have his quick anger and his judgments. Unbelievable. I would say that, it's unfortunate, but the way humanity is, living by the first level of knowledge is hearsay. So you're told something, you believe it, you follow it. And I would say that Spinoza, he was a Jew, he was a Jewish boy, grew up as Jewish, but he was excommunicated by the age of, I believe he was 22, because he could not didn't want to follow any longer the thoughts, the practices of the traditional Jewish beliefs. He began to question everything. And so they kicked him out because he began to become a threat. He didn't belong to their traditional thinking. And this is what Gurdjieff was talking about. Gurdjieff says that man is asleep, and he talks about that we are conditioned, and we follow our instincts, and the knowledge that we have is basically hearsay and experience. Experience meaning that, for instance, when I was a boy, you get information. My younger brother, a year and a half younger than I, learned his ABCs before I did. Can you imagine how I felt? He became smarter, and I thought, by this experience, I identify myself as being stupid. A teacher telling me that you're Mexican American, so you're very slow. You're a slow reader. Maybe you're having problems. You shouldn't speak Spanish at home. So someone tells you that's hearsay, but then you experience this also in your emotions, and so you begin to believe and doubt about yourself. But fortunately, even though underneath this passive mental activity or state that I was in, the sleep state I was in, underneath that, there was a persistence that I didn't know I had, but it seemed to say, come out. And the persistent was, I've always wanted to improve. And I read thousands of books and didn't seem to make sense. I mean, they made sense, but I didn't seem to be able to change. But not until I was able to be involved in a work group, not just a study group, but a work group. And we worked to understand Gurdjieff and Spinoza in our group. We had meetings in these meetings we would share ideas or get involved. I was actually involved in a community with my teacher and 6 other individuals for five years, and it was probably one of the best years of my life. As my life went, after say 8 years, my wife decided, my life in this work, this Gurdjieff and Spinoza work. After 8 years, my wife got tired of it. She says, I miss my friends. I miss going out to the restaurants. I'm missing the life that I enjoyed before this group, because the group was our life. And I found that I thrived in it. I loved it. And I said, well, I'm going to stay, and I knew if I'm going to stay and you're going to leave, we're going to have to separate, eventually divorce. And that's what happened. It wasn't an easy thing, and my God, it took me 2 years to get over the loss of my wife, my ex-wife, because even though we had, we were asleep, we had habits, and many of those habits were good, but also there were a lot of bad habits, a lot of bad patterns, confused patterns that I think that